Okay, so this is a video I've been promising to do for quite a while now. It's comparing the big three foils from Axis, the 1150, the 1300 and the new 1310. I've used these foils a lot, and I mean a hell of a lot, because here in Oman we get a lot of light wind conditions. So to make the most of all the conditions that I've got here, I've been forced to really get a grip on the best equipment out there for light wind foiling. Most of the time in sub 8 knots, I'm using a F1 CWC 8 meter and a 90 litre board. So for these three foils, even though they're in the PNG range, they all actually have quite different technical characteristics. So the 1150 I haven't actually got with me here at the moment. I've got the 1010, the 1310 and the 1300 because I don't own the 1150 anymore. I started off with the 1150. That was before the 1300 and certainly before the 1310 was available. And the 1150 did me brilliantly for a long time. It was my super light wind winging foil. It was my dedicated dock starting and flat water pumping foil. And occasionally I did some wake foiling with it, but that was really limited to the second wake and way beyond, sort of going all the way back to the fifth wake, that sort of thing. So let's start there with the 1150. The 1150 for me is a really easy to use pumping foil that is probably the easiest of them all to dock start. It's out of the three, it's certainly the easiest to turn, the easiest to maneuver. Out of all of the three, I would say it actually feels quite throw around, quite playful for a big foil. But one of the reasons I think why it makes such a good dock starting or wake thieving foil is because it's got a very limited range of speed. Within that range of speed, it performs so well. It really does perform so well. And that range of speed is perfectly suited for dock starting, flat water pumping, wake thieving, that sort of thing. As soon as you get it on the wing, so you're using it for winging, it becomes very draggy and it just feels like, oh, I always want to go faster. There's always the speed holding me back. So for winging, I wasn't a huge fan of it. For really small waves, surfing really small waves with a sup foil board, it was okay. But both of those last two things improved greatly when I started using the 1300. So when the 1300 came out, I got that straight away because I thought, okay, so this is higher aspect ratio, much more higher aspect ratio. And you can see the difference in the shape here. The 1310, 1150 and 1010 all look a very similar outline. And the 1300 on the top here clearly has a very, very different outline. It looks like a glider. It is a glider. And it's got much better speed, better glide. It's possible to accelerate it when you pump, and that's the real important thing here. So for winging, for downwinding, and even for subfoiling small waves, I much preferred the 1300 for those reasons, because it is faster and it glides more and it accelerates better when you're pumping. Now, initially, it took me quite a while to get used to it. When you turn, you start a carve, you are locked into that carve. So it's not what I would call as instantly throw around as the 1150. But after a while, I got to really like that characteristic, that once you're locked into a carve, it's so controlled, and it just makes for a really lovely characteristic. Like I say, it's totally different to the 1150. Now, also for dock starting, to begin with, I didn't really like it. I found it hard to actually initiate that, that jump dock start that I have to do, because I don't have any docks around me, so I'm restricted to ladder starting. So I'm literally standing on the edge of a platform on the top of my ladder, and as I release the board, I jump onto it. So it's like a static start, dock start, really. And I found the 1300 was nowhere near as easy as the 1150. So I sort of discarded it from the point of view of dock starting for me, because I still had the 1150 back then. Then I saw a guy on Facebook who was dock starting the 1300 so well, and I thought, right, I've got to go back to the 1300 and give it a go. So after one session, I dialed it in. I really had. And do you know what? I ended up preferring the 1300 over the 1150 for dock starting and flat water pumping, because, again, you can generate so much more speed with the 1300. You can accelerate when you're pumping. And that led to me being able to do much more dynamic carves, and you can keep that speed throughout the carve and then pump away from it. And yeah, it was just a style that me personally I preferred. And as I was really preferring downwinding with the 1300, it was a no-brainer for me. I decided to keep the 1300 and I sold the 1150. And there were times that I regretted selling the 1150, but then I got the 1010. And the 1010, for me, meant that I no longer needed or worried about the 1150, because if it was just not too big, but if the conditions were big enough for me to not use the 1300, whereas before I'd be like, yeah, the 1150's left a gap. Now the 1010 is like, wow. Don't need the 1150 anymore. The 1010 has still got amazing lift and a really wicked low-end speed, very low stall speed, but it is so much more manoeuvrable and considerably, noticeably faster as well. So if I'm not going to have the 1150, then the 1010 and the 1300, that means, I'm happy with that decision. Okay, so I've covered the 1150 and the 1300 pretty much. For winging, the 1300 is awesome because it just keeps on gliding and you've got that extra speed. It just feels so much nicer. And also that controlled, locked-in feeling when you're carving means you can practice your transitions with more confidence. The 1150, like I said, for me was too slow for winging. Then came the 1310. And, okay, where do we start? Dock starting. Let's start with that and flat water pumping. Dock starting was a bit of a double-edged sword for me because I found it a lot more technical. And whereas with the 1150 and the 1300, I can get pretty much 90%, certainly 8 out of 10 on a bad day. And pumping both of them was super easy. With the 1310, I could feel its potential. It's much harder for me to start. I don't know why. It was just bucking me off and I just couldn't find the rhythm. And when I was pumping, I could again feel the potential and easy to stay on the mast. I was putting less effort in, but suddenly I'd stall and, carving much more difficult. I just wasn't feeling it at all. And then one day I just thought, right, enough of this. So many people are getting on with the 1310 so well for dock starting and flat water pumping. I mean, records are being set, for goodness sake. What am I doing wrong? It's clearly not the foil. So I had a whole morning where I was just dock starting, analysing my technique, thinking what's going on, breaking it down. And I came to the conclusion that you've just got to slow everything down. So even from the point of jumping and landing on the board, there's a pause where you just glide and you just find that stability and then you start pumping. If you rush it, it all goes horribly wrong. It doesn't like that. I've done a whole video on dock starting technique for the 1310, so if you want to check that out, that's on my YouTube channel as well. So having got the jump and the start nailed for the 1310, I then started playing around with tail stabs and pump technique. And really, what I figured out was that it's all about the angle of attack. You don't want to let the the nose come up too much, because it really doesn't like having too high an angle of attack. My way of thinking is that it's such a big foil. If you're up too high, I mean, that's way exaggerated, obviously, but if you bring the foil angle up too high, then it starts to drag and immediately stalls and drops. And this is, at slower speeds. At higher speeds, you don't have that problem. So, being a little bit more refined on my pump technique, slowing things down and making sure that the nose of the board doesn't come up. In actual fact, starting every pump with a bit of a push down on my front foot really ironed out all of those problems. I'm now absolutely loving the 1310 for dock starting. I really am. Flat water pumping, chasing small swell. I still find it a bit on the slow side for downwinding. Downwinding, I'm still loving the 1300. I really am, because you've got that extra speed and glide and the acceleration from pumping. For downwinding, for me, that's what I prefer. But here's the real surprise for me. The 1310 has transformed my light wind winging. I mean, I cannot tell you how much better this foil is for light wind winging. I mean, super light wind winging. I used to say, okay, 8 to 10 knots, the 1300, yeah, that's fine. That's my minimum. If it's below 8 knots, just forget it. It's no fun. But the 1310 has just blown that away. 8 knots is like a really good day on the 1310. I mean, 6 to 8 knots is just still unbelievable. I'm no longer needing my 90-litre board. I'm on my 60-litre board, still with the CWC 8-metre wing, but a 60-litre board with the 8-metre wing and the 1310, and I'm getting up on foil easily in 6 to 8 knots. If it drops below 6 knots with any other foil, forget it. You're pumping the wing, you're pumping the foil just to keep going. But with this one, it's still pretty much effortless. Effortless to stay high on the mast, effortless to keep on gliding. And if you do need to pump, you can either pump just the wing, just a little bit, or just the foil, just a little bit. And you're not wearing yourself out to get through the lulls. Sorry, the fishing boats are making a hell of a racket. I hope that doesn't come across in the audio. So, from the point of view of subfoiling, no, I just wouldn't. It's not manoeuvrable enough. It really doesn't like turning quickly. At least I can't get it to do that. But when you're winging, because you've got the power in the wing and the balance to help you out, you can pivot it around on its yaw axis, and it's just unbelievable. And again, I've done another video on my YouTube channel about what's the best stab rear stabilizer to use with the 1310. And my conclusion was the 350, the progressive 350 rear stab, still gives you enough surface area, I suppose, to be able to pump the 1310 without losing too much of its magic pump power. You don't lose too much pump power or glide or lift, but wow, you can just turn it so much tighter. I mean, it's a really noticeable difference. And I used to go out on the 450, and I still do. For pure flat water pumping, I'll still use the progressive 450 or 475. But for light wind winging, without a shadow of a doubt, the 350, it just opens up that manoeuvrability that the 1310 was lacking for me when I first started using it. And now this is literally my favourite light wind winging wing, when I'm just messing around doing transitions, just gliding, a little bit of mowing the lawn, but you can still have fun. It's still fairly playful. Not as playful as the 1150, but in that light wind range, the 1150 just doesn't cut it in terms of lift and performance in that ridiculously low light wind range. So yeah, the 1310 seems to have a bigger wind range or range of speed overall compared to the 1150. 1300 is definitely faster. And yeah, it's all about tail size, stab size. Sorry, I know Adrian doesn't like when we call these tails. That's not a good thing. Anything that the 1150 can do, I now basically use the 1010. And yeah, you've got to put a little bit more effort in, but the returns in speed and manoeuvrability especially are so worth it. They really are. So this is my light wind winging, super small wave subfoiling, very, very low light wind, downwinding conditions type quiver. And I couldn't be happier, I really couldn't. So just so as you know, the fuselage that I use with all of these is the ultra short, and I'm pretty much on the 820 mast, high modulus power carbon mast for everything. It does make a huge difference, especially for the 1310. I mean, I don't think I'd even use the 1310 for winging with the aluminium mast. I really wouldn't. It's at speed, it's unstable. Turning, it's unstable. The high modulus mast just takes away all of that instability and allows you to use the foil how you want to use it. Yeah, okay, the aluminium mast is fine for the others, but the high modulus mast does improve the performance because of the instant reactivity. You put input in and it does it. I didn't realise before that there was flex with that aluminium mast, the 19mm aluminium mast. But I had a session after using the high mod mast for quite a long time, then went back to the aluminium mast just to see if it was in my head or if there really was a difference. And yes, there is a huge performance difference. But like I say, if you haven't got the high mod mast and you're on anything apart from the 1310, not a problem, don't worry about it. I think you can get away with flat water pumping the 1310 with the aluminium mast. That's really not a problem because you're not going very fast and you're not doing, super tight carves or turns, so it can cope. But the heavier you are, the more important that high mod mast is. So there we go. That is my breakdown of the big three, or even the big four PNG mast foils from Axis. I hope it's been useful, and hope the cats weren't too much of a distraction. That one's about to have a go at the camera, so I shall wish you good foiling and catch you on the next one.